Family, we're just getting everything set up here for our wonderful Zoom that we're gonna have today. And while everything's getting set up, I'm just uh, first and foremost, I want to thank you guys for being here on the Zoom with us today. It is a beautiful Monday morning or afternoon, depends on where you're watching us from, right? Um, I have a very, very special guest with us today. And you guys are in for a kicker, right? I think this is one of the topics that most tax preparers are always asking questions about and looking forward to in learning more about. So today we have Amanda Watson, who is an enrolled agent for about 23 years now, who's working at Drake Software. She's the lead customer engagement initiatives at Drake Software. That's a long one, right? I think I need a title as long as hers. But she's focused on elevating the experience for all Drake users. She oversees programs that strengthen retention, streamline onboarding, and drive long-term customer success. She also hosts a lot of monthly webinars that help tax professionals like yourself stay informed, confident, and connected throughout the year. So, thank you very much, Amanda, for being on this with us, right? And welcome, right? How was your Thanksgiving break?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thanksgiving was wonderful. It was nice to have some time to just take it easy and get away from it all with family, of course.
Right
Yeah.
on. I always like to say it's fulfilling, right? It's fulfilling.
Yes, yes, you're right. Yes.
But it's amazing. Maybe like I mentioned, this topic that we're gonna go over
Yeah.
today is super important, and I guess I won't take too much from you, right? But we're gonna be going over Schedule C and how to use Drake software with all that, right, Amanda?
Yes, yes. We're going to talk about the basics of Schedule C and then jump in and see how to do all that in Drake. That's right.
Perfect. So before I give it all to you,
Okay.
a little bit of housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, if you're on the Zoom with us here today, please by all means place them in the Q&A box, not the chat box, but the Q&A box, and I'll make sure to like stop Amanda, give her a signal, I don't know, dance up and down, uh, to let her know that we have a question here. And then if you're joining us on from all of our social medias, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, by all means, go ahead and put your questions in that chat as well too. There's a way I can kind of see everything. We want to make sure that we have everything answered and cleared for you in its entirety. So, with that being said, Amanda, it's completely all yours.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love working with the Latino Tax Pros. It's really just a great organization. And one of my most favorite events of the year is the Tax Fest. So if any of you joining us today have never attended that event, I highly recommend it. But let's get on to our Schedule C webinar. Today, as Robert said, we are going to talk about Schedule C. And while we're doing that, I am going to share my screen so that you can see exactly what we're talking about. So hopefully you can see everything there. So again, we're talking about the essentials of Schedule C. And we want to also look at how Schedule C looks in Drake Tax. So a little bit of both. And before we jump into Drake Tax, I want to take just a few minutes to look at the structure of Schedule C. Because if you're just starting out preparing Schedule C returns, or maybe you've just done a handful, it's really important to look at the structure of the actual Schedule C form. And that includes the information that you'll gather from your clients, areas where, some preparers might find challenges. And with that foundation in place, then we're going to hop into Drake Tax and look at the operational steps you'd need to prepare a Schedule C in Drake. So one thing about Schedule C, it is structured, and I really love forms because I like to see the structure of the form. But Schedule C is really structured to tell a story of the business, or in most cases, a small business from top to bottom. And it starts off by identifying what the business is and then walks through income, expenses, sometimes inventory, sometimes vehicle use. And then each section builds upon other sections to arrive at your taxpayers or the client's net profit or loss from business. And when you understand the purpose of each section, it really, the entries in, let's say, Drake Tax, for example, become really more intuitive, and the return itself is easier to review for accuracy. And the most important part, I think, of preparing a return is discussing it with your taxpayer because that's where your value as a tax professional is really built in your service and being able to really explain what's going on with the tax situation to the taxpayer. So I have a 2024 Schedule C on the right side of the screen, and I want to break it down into sections because I really always like to start there. So the first thing we're going to look at is that top section at the top of the Schedule C. And this is where you're going to enter in the business information. This is just the basics. Things like name and address of the business, accounting method, that business code is really important. It tells the IRS a lot of things about the taxpayer's business. And if your taxpayer has an EIN, you would enter it in that area. So that first section is just informational. Um, and as we move down to part one, here on the Schedule C, this is where you're going to start with your income. And I think this is really important. So, and it's a follows a lot like the structure of a 1040. First, you think about collecting, adding up all of your income. So all of the income from all sources, the gross receipts, cost of goods sold, all of that is adds together to come to the gross income. And it's going to also verify income sources from things like the 1099 NEC, and that is, of course, the 1099 for non-employee compensations. But it also can include things like cash, because a lot of small businesses accept cash, app-based payments like Venmo or Cash App or PayPal, or it may be any kind of checks, credit cards, any of those type of things would be included here. And again, if your taxpayer uses inventory, the cost of goods connection will be reported in this section too. Then after you've added up all of the income, we then move to the expense section. And the expense section, I think, is where there is a lot of confusion, especially among taxpayers. And like, what is deductible? What isn't? But it is really the heart of the Schedule C, in my opinion. It's where ordinary and necessary business expenses that are required to run the business are accounted for and subtracted. Now, each line in Part 2 represents a category the IRS recognizes as commonly deductible. Examples include, and you of course can see it on the screen, things like advertising, supplies, legal fees, travel, utilities, labor, wages that are paid. Also, some other tricky things that are included are things like depreciation or vehicle expenses. Those are a little bit more complex, I think, in calculating what amounts can be deductible. But one thing that is really important is accurate classification of the expenses definitely matters because a miscategorization or excessive expenses excuse me, trigger audits or red flags with the IRS. So your job as a tax professional is to confirm, of course, the nature of each expense and ensure it's tied to the business in most cases, and make sure the taxpayer can substantiate the expense if they're asked. So I really think that's an important part of why small businesses need a tax professional in their corner is to help them understand what is deductible and how to substantiate that. Because the last thing that taxpayers need to do is have a bunch of expenses deducted and then, of course, not be able to substantiate that or back it up with documentation. So once we have the income and expenses in this lower section of the Schedule C, now the Schedule C is 2 pages, and right here on this screen, we're just looking at page 1. So in the bottom section of page 1 is where we're going to do a lot of some math, I would say. I would say this is the math section, where you're going to take items that flow from part 1 and part 2 and net those against one another. For example, you're going to take the income, and this is very general, and then you're going to subtract the expenses, and that would give you the net profit or loss from the business. And then those amounts that were calculated in this section will flow to different areas on the tax return. depending on, circumstances of the business. Now, part two, excuse me, page two of the Schedule C has a lot of really important information, but it may not be used every time you prepare a return with a Schedule C. So, part three, and this is at the top of page two, part three is where the cost of goods sold is calculated. And this section only applies to businesses that produce or buy items for resale. So if you're, if inventory, I guess I should say. So you're going to use this section to calculate the cost of goods sold by tracking inventory purchases, items withdrawn for personal use, if any, and then you calculate the ending inventory, and that result determines the gross profit from the cost of goods sold. Now, that amount that's calculated will flow back up into part one. Remember, if we go back to page one, part one is income. So the cost of goods sold is going to flow back into that section. So if there's no cost of goods sold, part three is not needed. Part four, right here, is important if the taxpayer is claiming vehicle expenses. And if there is a vehicle expenses that are being deducted on Schedule C, this part may need to be completed depending on a few factors in the situation. So if it may ask things like, oh, you can see some of the fields when the vehicle was placed in service, the number of miles, business miles, commuting miles, and then ask some of those questions, for example, like, was your vehicle available for personal use off-duty hours? So if you have a taxpayer um, that is claiming that they may need to complete this section. So that's important. But if there's no vehicle, the section's not needed. And then part three is that catch-all, excuse me, not part three, part five is that catch-all section where there are other expenses. Now, it doesn't, just because they're blank lines doesn't necessarily mean that a taxpayer or anyone, you can just add whatever you want there. You do want to list business expenses that don't fit into one of the other standard categories that we saw on page one of the Schedule C. Examples may include things like bank fees or education may be tied to your business dues, like if you're a member of a professional organization and there's any dues, or you've been to a conference maybe, or smaller reoccurring cost. And each item listed needs a short description, but I encourage you when you're working with taxpayers to make sure it's a clear description, even though it's short. I discourage any taxpayer from including something very vague because that may cause somebody to have a question about the return later. This section does give the taxpayer a little flexibility while still requiring documentation. And the IRS does expect some reasonable explanation in this section. So if you have some questions about the type of things that can be here or deducted here, I always like to refer preparers to the Schedule C instructions. I think it's a really great place to start. While it may seem a little obvious, I think it's really important just to get a good reading of that. And I found the instructions are really easy to read, especially if you are just starting off preparing Schedule Cs or you haven't done many. I think instructions seem to be pretty easy to read for me. So I think they are for other people as well. So again, back on part four and part five, both of those sections, if there's any information included there, they're going to really come into the expense section that's going to, of course, deduct from the income to arrive at the net profit or loss. And that is ultimately what is going to flow back to the 1040. So before we hop into Drake tax, I want to talk about just a few things that I think are common issues with Schedule C. And when we are in Drake, I'll show you some tips in there about how to avoid these or ways to make sure that you are, thinking about them as you go forward. So, it was Schedule C issues generally come down to income. These items I've listed here. One of the top reasons that we see issues with Schedule C is missing or omitted income. And sometimes clients, your taxpayer may not bring you all the income, so that makes it, of course, very difficult to track that. But they may only bring their 1099s and forget to bring things like cash payments or those app-based payments. Um, they may have done some work where there wasn't a 1099 issued, but there should have been. Underreporting income is one of the most frequent sources of notices and audits. So it's really important to work with your taxpayer to make sure that you have all of their missing income, and they may not even realize, or they may have just overlooked it. So just a few probing questions can really help make sure that you're capturing that just to save a headache later. Another thing that I see a lot, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to move the slide there. The second thing that I have on my list that I see a lot is commingled personal and business expenses. And I think like when some taxpayers or small businesses, especially when they first start, they may not remember to open up a separate bank account for their business. They may use their personal credit cards for business expenses. And that really can make things a little messy. It can lead to personal items being recorded as business expenses and vice versa, incorrect totals, and which ultimately leads to the inability to substantiate those deductions. And we want to make sure everything is clear and above board on Schedule C. Preparers should help their clients separate and correctly classify those expenses. And of course, as a tax return preparer, we would love our taxpayers to come to us with everything really neat and nice and categorized, but often it isn't so when we see them. So sometimes that can take some time. And of course, if you are helping your taxpayer with this, my opinion is you should charge for your time because that is a great value that you are offering to your taxpayer. Another thing I see a lot is unsupported or overestimated deductions or expenses in that case. So a lot of clients like to round up. So I don't know if you've ever seen a client who brought in their expenses and they're all like dollar amounts, like the advertising $30, legal fees $40, and everything is just a round number. And that is actually, I think, a red flag for the IRS. And of course, we don't want to, we want to make sure everything is supported. And there's some key areas where I see an overestimation of expenses like meals, for example, or supplies, because they haven't actually tracked those. Anytime that they can track those, it's going to be for the better. Another one is travel, home office, and vehicle use. Those are some that are a little aggressively reported sometimes. And often these items result the overestimation from poor record keeping. Lack of documentation is, of course, one of the biggest challenges that I think preparers see when working with taxpayers with Schedule C because there are missing receipts, um, receipts commingled with their personal receipts, no mileage logs for vehicle deductions, no invoices or statements when they have inventory or they're calculating the cost of goods sold, and of course, no clear business records. So it's good record keeping is essential for supporting both the income and the deduction. So it's really critical, I think, as we're helping those small businesses and sole proprietors. Another important item that is sometimes missing is the business code. And I'm going to show you exactly how you can find the business codes right in Drake Tax. But if you're not using Drake Tax, there is, of course, a list of those in the Schedule C instructions. And of course, you can find those other places as well. But the wrong choice of code can again raise some red flags. It can trigger mismatches for industry benchmarks, for example, and lead to maybe some unnecessary question if it's the total wrong category. So it's really important to have the right category. And if you're unsure, I think this is a great place to use your network. You can network with someone, maybe with Latino tax professionals or some of your colleagues that would know, like, hey, I have this business. What business code should I use? Because I see that a lot in a lot of online prepare communities. Another common issue or mistake that I see with Schedule C are inventory errors and cost of good errors and or cost of goods sold errors, I should say. And usually that happens because there's not a proper inventory count or the beginning or ending inventory is incorrect, not pulling out personal use items and failing to track purchases properly, and those can cause incorrect gross profit calculation. So again, that's important. Vehicle deduction mistakes, that's really a big area for audit deductions because, if you think about all of these expenses, which one can easily have a gray area between personal and business? Like maybe not advertising expenses, but maybe vehicle, because of course that's um, so easily used for business, excuse me, personal and business. So it is one of the most common areas that I see IRS notices or audits if we see those. And issues usually arrive around not having a business log or claiming 100% business use on the vehicle, switching between mileage and actual expenses without following the rules of those. And a lot of taxpayers don't know those rules. So, of course, they may get their tax advice from somewhere else before they come to you and be a little confused. And that can often, raise some eyebrows there if they're switching back and forth. And also, one area that I see a mistake in accounting for vehicle deductions is not separating out commuting miles. And many taxpayers probably think commuting miles are deductible, but of course, as professionals, we know they aren't. So we want to be sure and capture those correctly and not cause any any reason for a second look. And the same thing applies to home office deduction. It's the same type of thing as the vehicle deduction because there's such a gray area there between professional and personal use. And clients really often misunderstand what qualifies as a home office. But we know as tax professionals, there are very specific rules. And the reason that there are very specific rules is because of the gray area. So we want to be sure when adding that information to the tax return that we don't include things like space that's not exclusively used for business or double counting your utilities for the home office and for like Schedule A for the same amounts or using the wrong calculation method, things that taxpayers may not understand, but things that you as a professional can certainly help out with. Now, I have a couple of more, and then we're going to hop into Drake Tax and take a look there. But a couple other, the last two, mixing capital and current expenses. Some clients treat every expense as deductible expense, even when it should be depreciated or treated like a capital asset. And then, of course, there is misunderstanding self-employment tax implications. A lot of sole proprietors and small businesses are caught off guard when they owe self-employment tax. They may not even know about self-employment tax, and they are not paying estimated tax payments, or not having any withholdings. And if they have some 1099s that offer withholdings, and may end up with really large balance dues. So we want to be able to be sure to work with our taxpayers to make sure that um, they're not getting themselves in trouble there. So we've talked a little bit about how the Schedule C is organized and how each part's designed to capture, income deductions, etc. And now let's talk about how to enter it in Drake Tax. So I have Drake Tax open right here. Now I am going to use Drake Tax for tax year 24. And Drake Tax 2025 is available now. However, it's just a preseason release. And you can certainly go in there and prepare returns, but we don't recommend finalizing returns until after our January update so that you have all of those final state files and final federal calculation files. So I'm just going to work in Drake Tax 24 today, just for good measure. So, if you've never seen Drake Tax before, this is the homepage of Drake Tax. And I don't have a lot of clients entered into this version of my Drake Tax because it's just one I use for demonstration. But I've been working on a return right here, and it's just a 1040 return. And I want to show you how we can enter Schedule C information. So Drake software is menu driven, which means we access a menu of data entry screens where we enter data for the tax return. So I like to enter a lot of all the data that I have. Like I'm going to enter all the information about the taxpayers, my source documents, all their income deduction, credits, all that information. I'm going to enter all of that before I worry about things like what is their refund or balance due because it's not going to be accurate until we have everything entered. So Drake really um, is built well for that method because it is menu driven. So here we see a list of data entry screens. And across the top here, these are tabs where you can access different menus where screens are categorized into different items. So I already have some information um, entered in here, but let's first think, before we look at the Schedule C entry screen, let's say we have this taxpayer and they received a 1099 NEC for non-employee compensation. So I'm going to open that screen and I'm just going to say our taxpayer here brought me as their tax return preparer the 1099 NEC. So one of the first things I do when I prepare a return is after I get their name and information and independence, I start entering source documents, whether it's a 1099 or a W-2 or whatever it may be. I like to get that out of the way first just to get everything in there. So this is where we would enter in the 1099 NEC. So I am going to enter the information here. I'm going to put a T at the top to allocate this to the taxpayer. Now I know this taxpayer has a Schedule C, so when I enter this income, I want it to flow to my Schedule C. So I'm going to type in a Schedule C there, and then I'm going to enter information about the payer. And I'm just going to enter in some information here. It's going to be very basic because I'm just a demo here. So, okay, so I've entered in the payer information. The recipient's information is just pulling directly from the taxpayer's information. If I needed it to be different, I could, but everything looks good. And I am going to look at my 1099 NAC and I'm going to enter what is there. So on this 1099 NAC, we have non-employee compensation that is it is reported. So let's type in what we see on the form. So let's say it's 50,000 in this case. If there were any federal tax withheld, I would enter that here. And of course, we have some fields at the bottom of the screen to enter those amounts for federal amounts. I'm not good, excuse me, state. I'm not going to enter any state information today just to keep this pretty simple. So that's all I have. If I had more 1099 NECs, because it's very likely that a lot of sole proprietors and small businesses may have more than one 1099 NEC, I could just hit page down on my keyboard and continue entering those. When I'm finished entering that, I can hop over to my Schedule C entry screen. And to do that, I can click on the Income tab and then select Schedule C. Or I can just go to my selector field and type in C, which is normally what I do because it's a really quick way to navigate through Drake data entry. So here I am on the Schedule C entry screen. Now, before our webinar started today, I entered a little bit of information here at the top of the Schedule C. And when you look at this screen, you may recognize the format, and the format follows very closely with the Schedule C that we looked at the top of the call, like the actual form. We have part one, which is going to be this section at the top, or not part one, the information section. And that's just going to include all the information. Part one is income, part three is expenses. And then we have the potential that some items from other screens would flow to our Schedule C. So let's take a look at how that works. So one thing that you'll notice here, I haven't entered the business code. And it is one of those items that I mentioned that can flag a return or is a common mistake, is having the wrong code or a missing code. So when you use Drake, you can use the drop list to see all of the available options. Now, these options are pulled directly from the Schedule C instructions from the IRS, so only what they allow is available there. And when you use the drop list, you can search through and find the appropriate code. You can also, if you know the code, you can just type it in here. But you may not know the code, and the list here is in numeric order. So if you don't know the number, you may have to look through the list. But that seems a little time consuming. So we have a quick tip here for you. You can just right click in this field and you can choose search. Or you can also use the shortcut key, Control Shift S. And now I have this window that appears where I can search the business code fields. So this person is a florist. So I'm just going to type in something very generic and very general because I am searching those IRS descriptions. So I'm just going to type in FLO. I'm not going to get very specific here because I want to narrow down the results, but get as many results as needed. So when I type in FLO and press enter, it's returned three options, which is much more manageable than the list we saw initially. So that is flooring contractors, no. Flower nursery stock and florist supplies, no. And then the last one is florist. It's exactly what we want. So I can just click on it and click OK, or actually I can just double click on it and it will fill in that business code right there in the field for me. And we've had that feature, that tool in Drake for years, but sometimes I find that, some of our customers that have used Drake for a long time miss that. So I wanted to be sure and bring that to your attention there. So enter the business code. If your taxpayer has an EIN, you can enter that here. I'm just not going to worry about that today. And then I am going to just hop down here to part one, which is where we enter income. Now, if you remember, we entered in $50,000 of income that was reported on 1099 NEC and it's not showing on the screen. And that's deliberate because we have line one here. We know that the NEC will flow to Schedule C line one, but it doesn't flow necessarily to the Schedule C entry screen because we want this screen to allow you to adjust that amount. Like maybe you had some cash receipts too. So I wanted to enter in cash receipts. Oh, it says I added 500K, not 50K. Well, maybe I added an extra zero. I meant to add 50. We'll see in just a few minutes. So let's say I add in $2,000 in cash, and then that's going to add to anything else flowing to the Schedule C from any other source. And sometimes people may type the 1099 NEC income directly on line one, but I think it's a good practice to go ahead and enter it on in that form because I think it could be very helpful for your state return too. So I would generally recommend using that screen. And if you have more than one, it tracks it all very nicely. If you have, let's say, 10 sources of income and you want to record those individually instead of adding those together and typing in a number, you can create what we call a detail worksheet. And to add a detail worksheet, you can right click in the field and click add worksheet, or you can use Control W or actually just double click in the field. So I could say cash 2000 and then I had check, maybe I had 1000 and let's say Venmo and didn't get a 1099K or anything. I had another 1,000. So when I enter those, it's going to take the total, which at the right here, it's 4,000. And when I close this, it's going to take that amount and enter it right there on that line. And it's highlighted the field red, so you visually know right away that there is a detail worksheet associated with that line. And when I view the return in just a little bit, we'll be able to see that. And it really helps for record keeping and helps substantiate those items. Later, if there's a question, you can look at that worksheet and tell exactly what that $4,000, what composes that. So that's great. And you'll also see here to the left that there is a plus slash minus. That's another visual indicator to let you know that this is an adjustment field. If it were red equal sign like we see here for depletion, that tells us if I type something in, it's going to completely override everything else the program attempts to do. But this plus minus tells me anything in this field would add to or subtract from anything flowing from another source. Okay, so let's just keep moving. Returns or allowances. I'm not going to enter anything there. I could also enter other income there. So then we're moving down to part two, expenses. And I like to add a worksheet here for the advertising expenses too. And one really nice thing about these worksheets that I'm creating is that they will update to next year. So next year, magazine, when I get ready to enter these, I will have just those descriptions that will carry forward. So I'll be like, hey, last year you had magazine ads. Do you have those this year? So it helps really trigger all of the expenses that were available or deducted in the year before. Now, some of you may be wondering, are these worksheets e-filed to the IRS? And they are not e-filed because the IRS gives us a very specific schema or blueprint of what they want. And that these aren't included. So we will tell you, like if it were other expenses here, this is that section we saw at the bottom of page 2. When I create a Control W worksheet or add the worksheet here, you'll see a banner at the top that says IRS requires this field to have a worksheet. And if you see that banner, that means this will be e-filed to the IRS, or they'll get this data. Otherwise, they won't get the data. I'm just going to put just some other things here. Um, and enter that. So that information will be e-filed, but most of those that you create at will not. Now, over on the right side, I skipped over a lot of fields that you can enter expenses for, but most of those are direct entries. We see over on the right that we have a link to the Form 8829 is where you'd enter information about the business use of home. And we also have a section here to enter in cost of goods sold. And if you are deducting the vehicle expenses, we have an auto worksheet where, and all these blue links on the screen will take you to a new screen to input data. So it makes it really simple to do that. I'm not going to input data on that screen right now, but I just wanted to show you how you can easily come over and enter data. So everything is like linked here. So you can access the same screen a number of ways. So what I want to do now is before we do anything else, I want to actually look at the tax return. So in order to do that, from any screen, always in Drake, I can come to the top of the screen and click View Print or Calculate just to get the rough numbers, but I want to actually look at the form. Or I can use one of our shortcut keys to go to View Mode. And since I was on the Schedule C screen when I prompted to go to View Mode with my shortcut key, it takes me right to the Schedule C, so it's really nice. So here is the Schedule C, and it's taken all of the information that I've entered not only on that Schedule C screen, but also on the 1099 NEC. And someone put it in the Q&A that I entered 500,000 instead of 50, and you can see exactly that I did that. I just got carried away with the zeros, and it's just as a made up scenario, so it's a-okay. So we see that $504,000, and that is reported on line 1. And we know that that $4,000 I entered directly on the Schedule C, and the 500 is coming from the 1099 NAC. If you wanted to like drill down, maybe you're reviewing a return that someone else prepared and you want to say, where did that 504 come from? You can right click in the field and choose Review Input Sources. This activates one of our features called linkbacks. And from there, you can go click on the data entry tab and it's going to tell you exactly where those amounts came from. So right there is the 1099 NAC. If I click on it, it takes me back to the exact spot where I entered that information. So you can always link back there to where the information came from. And if it comes from like a calculated schedule, you can also hop over to that. So, one other thing I want to show you before we continue down the nice Schedule C is remember how we created a detail worksheet for this field. You can click over here to the overflow statement and you can just, and this is showing red just because that is how I have mine set up to like pop off the form so I can easily determine what the program is entering for this taxpayer versus the form, but it doesn't print red. And you can change any of these colors at any time. You can also determine that you only want to print one overflow statement per page, but I have mine combined because I think it's easier that way. So here's Schedule C line 1 gross receipts. There's exactly what I entered, so I can see how that is calculating and have also a supporting document for that. And you will also see the Schedule C line 8 showing right there. All right, so I'm just clicking right here in my left. We call this like a tree, I think, or you can just click the forms that you want. So as I move down the Schedule C, you can see all of my expenses that I have entered. Now, depreciation is something I didn't enter, but I had some depreciable assets entered before our webinar today. So that amount is calculating and pulling over right there. The others, this 27A is pulling from, of course, that worksheet that we entered, and it's all those expenses total a little over $9,000, which is then deducted from the 504, which gives our total net profit $494,000. If I scroll down to page 2, you'll notice that I don't have anything in part 3 or 4, but I do have something in part 5, and that is where we saw those expenses entered for part 5. And that's when I was like, yes, these amounts will be transmitted to the IRS when we forced you to use that worksheet there. Okay, so the going back to the page 1, which is where all the information happens, this 494, of course, will flow out to our 1040, and it will show right there on, well, it actually flows to Schedule 1, which then flows to the 1040. So there's our $494,000. Now I want to, before we look at the depreciation. I want to show you the depreciation schedule, but before we do, I want to go back to data entry very quickly and show you where I entered that. So I entered this on the 4562 depreciation detail screen, and I have two assets entered. So I kept it really simple for our a presentation today and entered asset 1 with a cost of 10,000. Makers was our method and our life was 5. 100% business use. So this would be considered placed in service in the current tax year because I'm using 24 software. I can hit page down on my keyboard. Asset 2, I entered as 50,000 with a makers method of makers and 7 year. Now you can enter hundreds, thousands of assets. And to make that easier, we have something called grid mode where you can come in and easily just enter your items very quickly like this. Oops, I put it the wrong way. And you can enter it really quick like this. You can also import assets. If you have your assets already on a spreadsheet for whatever reason, you can import those as well. So you can enter this really easily. So I want to go back to view mode and I want to show you how this looks on our depreciation schedule because we already saw it flowing there. Now, I did add an additional asset since we last looked at our Schedule C, but let's look at the depreciation federal schedule. So we have this in landscape, which I think is reports out really nicely. We have all three of the assets that I entered, the date, placed in service, the cost, and the business percent use. There is no basis adjustment for these assets. I elected out a bonus depreciation. I didn't add any Section 179, so the depreciable basis is the same as the cost in this case. There's the life, and because we use makers, we have a 200% declining balance with a half-year convention. There's the makers tables. I'm kind of a depreciation nerd, so I like to know where everything comes from. But ultimately, you're going to see the current year depreciation listed for each asset. If there were prior year depreciation, you would see it in the accumulated depreciation column added to the current. If I scroll down to the bottom of the screen, you can see the total depreciable or depreciation deduction right there. And of course, that's going to flow to your Schedule C and Form 4562 right here. And it's on a statement because we had more than one item there. So let's go back to the Schedule C, and it went up a little bit because it added an additional asset. So it flows right there. And of course, if I wanted to review the input sources, it would take me back to the various forms and screens where that was entered. So that is their Schedule C can get really complex. And we didn't mention things in Drake tax like office and home deduction. We didn't enter an automobile, but we do have a screen reserved for both of those things. But they can be entered very easily in Drake, and everything calculates nicely. One thing that I did, we will automatic. I did. I should say one thing I forgot to mention is that we're going to automatically calculate if the taxpayer should make estimated tax payments for the next tax year, and we'll automatically generate those vouchers. In this case, we have a really high income without any payments. Well, I had, I think, $4,000 paid in, but you'll see that it's calculated that I need to pay 40, or this taxpayer needs to pay about $46,000 a quarter, which is a lot. But so we can set those up for ACH deposit, or direct, not deposit, ACH withdrawals, or you can send these vouchers to your taxpayer and they can take care of it from there. I think the IRS is discouraging checks as we head into the new tax season, however. But and then you can see here is the summary of estimates calculated so that all of that's taken care of. If you don't want Drake to calculate that for you, of course, you can turn it off. But we have a lot of supporting documents here, including one thing that happens automatically on a Schedule C is the QBI deduction. So we calculate that and of course bring that back to the 1040. So that was a really quick overview of all things Schedule C. Well, maybe not all things because there was so much to cover, but I just wanted to know, Robert, do we have any outstanding questions anywhere?
You know what? I don't see anything
Okay,
just yet, but I did want to
okay.
mention we got viewers and listeners from
Uh-huh.
coast to coast. I
Wow.
got people from LaBelle, Florida, all the way up to Conchola, Templeton, California. So we got a lot of people tuned in onto this. I wanted to say
Nice.
you did an excellent job. If you guys have any questions, by all means, please put them in the chat right now or put them wherever you're listening at while we have Amanda here at our disposal, right? And something that I kind of want to touch back on. I mean,
Hmm.
some people are afraid, right? When they
Yeah,
get into taxes to do a Schedule C, and I love how you
right.
mentioned it in the beginning that it's just like you're telling a story.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's just like any other form, right? You just go
Right.
section by section, line by line. And
Hmm.
prior to me getting into the tax industry, because I've had my own business now for 15 years,
Oh, yeah.
my preparer before used to say, "Well, do you have receipts to back it up?" Yeah, so right, that's the one thing that you need to ask your clients. Do you have your receipts to back up this
Yes,
deduction? Right? Um,
absolutely.
and then like a little fun fact, I don't know if a lot of people knew, but the most audited returns are 1099s.
Oh, yes, of course, because there's so much misunderstanding out there among taxpayers, and that's really why they need professionals like you guys to help them navigate the Schedule C because it's not all that complex. As long as you understand the purpose of each section, and then you have some help there if you need the Schedule C instructions. There's a lot of great tax reference guides that you can use. But just knowing what you need and knowing those pitfalls not to fall into, and you're right, Robert. Documenting everything is key for Schedule C.
Yeah, one thing I like to do too is on their in their files, right? I always like to put down like I asked if this was all their income and I have them initial it too. So
Oh,
that was my
yeah.
thing. That's my thing is having them initial it so to make sure that I
Uh-huh.
have something there, right? Because like you mentioned, one things that they forget maybe is cash or And
Uh-huh.
maybe something that fell through the cracks. But at the end of the day, our job is to report what we have in front of us and to
Uh-huh.
take our client's word for it. And then at the end of the day, we need to take care of
Absolutely.
ourselves, right? We need to take care of ourselves as preparers as well. We do
Yeah, and
have a
then
question right
yeah.
here from Noelia. Um, she requested if you can repeat the pop-up screen with the details.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
sure. Let me go back to Drake really quickly. I think she must mean the detail screen on the Schedule C.
Maybe Noelia,
Maybe,
if you can respond back right there, maybe we can get a clear
yeah.
question
I
on
think
that.
it's, I called it a detail worksheet. And you can, if that's what she means, you can do that for any field in Drake Tax. But Schedule C is such a critical place to do that because of documenting everything. And it's just, and once you add these worksheets, they become part of the tax return. And you save that whether you're saving it to PDF or actual piece of paper, like having that as part of the return is important. So, like for example, here in supplies, instead of just entering $500, I can of course right click and choose add worksheet or use Control W, and then I can just enter whatever it is. Maybe I have paper. I'm just going to make this up. I don't know what else. Tape. Like, these are really bad examples, but you can
Stapler,
enter whatever it is. Glue.
staples,
Yeah,
paper clips.
staples. That's a great one. These are all items that you can type in here, and then of course it's going to make that total for you 600. And then when I close that, it's going to take that amount, fill it in, and then the red may look alarming, but it's not. It just means, hey, you have a worksheet. And so when I look at that, of course, I'm just going back to view mode really quickly. You can see that everything I just typed in is there. And if I wanted these on separate pages or separate pieces of paper, we have just a checkbox that can create a separate page for each line if you'd like. But and then, like I said, this is going to update next year. So in 25, when I update my Schedule C, the paper, tape, glue, and staples are all going to be there. We're not going to bring forward the numbers because we don't want to introduce error, but you're going to be like, hey, Robert, did you have paper that you want to deduct again this year? And your taxpayer is going to think you're the smartest person ever for remembering all the things that they had receipts for last year. And it's really just getting them to think. And I think like signing their income is a great idea because before someone signs something, they're probably going to take a second look. And I see a question here from Erica about how important is it to have an EIN on Schedule C. And I would say if the taxpayer has an EIN, it should be entered, but not all sole proprietors will have an EIN. Most may, but I would say enter it if you have it, if the taxpayer has one. And if not, of course, don't enter it. Because sometimes we only see those when people have employees or some other reason. But it's very possible that they don't even have one. Yep, that's a great question.
That is a great question, and
Yeah.
that might flow into a different conversation, right? About
Yeah.
entity, what kind of entity to choose, or
Yes.
what kind of
Yeah.
business structure you have, all that stuff. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, let's see. Do we have any other questions here? Also, we got Reina Perez. She's asking if this webinar is being recorded. It is. You'll be able to catch it, replay on any of our social media platforms, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, or even YouTube. So just, if you're following us on Facebook, if you're not following us on Facebook, you should. And then make
Yes.
sure you hit the alert. So anytime we go live with like someone like Amanda that's giving you guys some great information, it'll alert you and let you know that we're going live. But yes, it is being recorded.
Oh, yeah.
And
Great.
let me see. Do we have any final questions here? Just looking at all the different screens that I have here. Sorry about that, Amanda. Let
Oh,
me see. It looks like okay.
I
We do
see
have
one
another
here.
question from Kimberly Rodriguez.
Oh,
Can you recap why the 1099 NEC doesn't show the amount on the C,
yes,
on Schedule
yes, of
C?
course, I can do that. And it's a little confusing at first, Kimberly, and I understand why you're asking. So, again, just to recap, we entered in a 1099 NEC, and I entered in, oh, that's not it. Sorry, wrong screen. The 1099 NEC, I entered in $500,000. And it is going to flow to the Schedule C because at the top of the screen, I told this screen to flow there. There are other places it could go, like a Schedule F, for example. Sometimes it may go directly to line 8, not generally. most of the time it's going to go to Schedule C, but I could have had like 10 1099 NECs and I could have entered them all here. And it's really nice to enter them here so that they can flow properly to your states. And every state's a little different. If I had more than one Schedule C, I could say I wanted to go to the first one or the third one. In this case, I only have one. But I think what Kimberly is asking, when we look at the C entry screen, you'll notice that the 500,000 doesn't flow right here. And generally in Drake, items that are typed in on one screen do not flow to another screen. Everything flows to output so it can be calculated because every time you go to view the forms, there's a calculation behind the scenes. And the key reason that it doesn't flow is because we want this field right here to be available for any additional gross receipts and sales. So you can see how it has this plus minus that tells me if I type in a positive number, it's going to add to anything coming from any other source, whether it's the 1099 NEC or some other place, and or whatever's directly entered here. So it gives us the availability to adjust this field. If the 500 was flowing here, it would be a little confusing, and it would almost be like we're entering it twice. And I
Hmm.
have seen people do that, and that's not what we want. So we leave this field available for you to adjust that by adding to that, or even if you had a negative number, you'd want to do that. So everything's gonna flow what we call to view mode or output, and you're gonna see it all flow really nicely here to line one. And of course, you can use that link back to see where everything comes from.
What an excellent answer,
Oh yeah.
Amanda. I love it. I love it. I love it. So,
Yeah.
we're coming up close to
Okay.
the end of the hour here.
Okay.
So before I do let you go, man, I want to thank you and appreciate and to let you know that we appreciate you being on this webinar with
You.
us and sharing us your intellectual property, right? And just to let you know, this is all for free, right? All for free. So
Yeah.
don't worry about that. And I know you mentioned in the beginning there's other ways for them to get training from you guys and all that in the beginning, right? Maybe you can
Yep.
kind of mention that one more time, see where they can get that info from.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you have any questions, if you're a Drake software user or you are not, you can visit drakesoftware.com. And if you're a Drake software customer, you can log in there and access a lot of our training. We have free webinars, free video tutorials. We have a Drake software knowledge base, and we also offer drakecpe.com if you were looking for CPE.
Hmm.
However, if you're not a Drake customer and you're thinking about it, one of the things that we have for our customers who purchase our unlimited package, we have onboarding. They can help you get acquainted with everything there. So we have a lot of resources about how to use Drake. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us and we'd love to help you.
Yeah, thank you for that information again, Amanda. Another opportunity for you guys to meet face to face with Drake Software
Mm.
is going to be here. Let me share my screen real quick.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Yeah, here we go. Let me know if you could see that for me, Amanda. Can you see that right there?
Yes, yes,
Right on, right? So I know Amanda mentioned it in the beginning, right? We have
yes,
our Latino Tax Fest event.
yes.
Um, it's coming up next year again, June 22nd to the 25th. Drake, as one of our preferred providers, will be exhibiting
Uh-huh.
in our upgraded and newly improved marketplace as well. If you thought last year we had a huge marketplace, wait till you see the layout this year. We're growing every single year, which is amazing, and it's thanks to everyone that's on, watching us here live. But it's over 3,000 live tax professionals going to this event, hungry for information, and we have great partners like Amanda and Drake there that are willing and they
Yeah.
want to help grow and build and expand your business. So if you're with the software in between softwares, yeah, reach out to Amanda. Maybe Drake might be the right company for you, right? So we do have a price increase. Obviously, we want to get everything on discount, right? I don't know about you, but I remember when I used to go shopping with my mom, right, at the mall, and I'd always get separated from her. I always knew where to find her. She'd be at the discount rack, right? So if I ever lost her, I'd always find my mom, short little lady, but I always found her at the discount rack, and we're always looking for discounts. So right now, the Vegas tax event, in order for you to go, it's $449. At the end of the month, we do have a little price increase going up to 499, but we want to help you out with the discount, right? We want to help you out with the discount. We want to give it to you guys for the show special of 399 today, right? 399 today. We have our call center here waiting to take your orders. If you have groups, if you have a group order and something like that, we can probably help you out with another discount there. But give us a call, 866-936 2587. It's 4 full days of excitement. Obviously, we have education, we have live training. This last year, we did live corporations class during the thing too. So that was an amazing event. And not only that, obviously, we're in Vegas. We need to relax a little bit. We have our meet and greet, we have our mariachi mixer, and we have our pool party, right? If you've never been there, or if you have been there, please let people know your experience, right? Go ahead and put in the chat. Let them know that they should be there, right? This is an event. It's a must go event. If you've been to the IRS forums, I guarantee you might have a different feeling if you come to our event. And in a good way, right? In a good way. Obviously, the
Yeah.
IRS forums, they're going to give you the information that you're going to get over here too, right? The same speakers flow through, but it's just delivered and packaged in a different way coming our way,
Mhm.
right? So again, we got a special discount. Anyone who wants to get it, go ahead and give us a call, 866 936 2587. We have one other event that's starting tomorrow. I know it kind of flows through for what Amanda was talking about today's schedule C, and I know we had some questions about why, how, flowing from different 1099s and all that stuff, and then maybe getting into a little bit more higher law when it comes to corporations training. We do have a corporations class coming up that starts tomorrow, December 9th through the 11th. It is live with instructors. You'll be able to ask questions. It's a fully interactive course. We give you forms and we teach you how to fill out the forms, right? Right now, it's showing at $1,200, but we're doing a discount for extended Black Friday. It's $1,000. If you mention this webinar, right, with Amanda and Drake, you get $200 off, right? So $1,000. There's some more savings going out to you as well, right? And we are hosting it in English and in Spanish. Um, the great thing about these webinars, just like this one being recorded and posted on social media, is it's recorded and you'll have access lifetime to the recordings, right? So it's something that you can always go back and refresh on some of the information. Last but not least, right, is we have our AFSP class, right? If you have not done if you're outside of California and you still need to do your AFSP course, we have that going on right now. We have English, Spanish, and bilingual as well too. Make sure to set yourself aside from other tax preparers. By getting this certification, right, you get limited representation rights in front of the IRS. You get placed on the list, right, on the directory, that tax preparer directory list. You get record of complaints. Just something else that you could put up on your wall, right? People want to know that they're dealing with a person that's number one, up to date with all the newest changes, right, and always in compliance, right, up to date in compliance. We just had a compliance webinar the other day, so I have to make sure I say that. Compliance, compliance, compliance. But call us right here. Let us help you take care of that course. We have a special discount waiting for you too. Like I said, we have Diego and Maria right here manning the phones. They're actually reading right now. They're on the calls right now. So if you haven't called yet, make sure you call in. I am over the hour. Amanda, again, thank you so much for your time today. We do appreciate it. Until next time, Latino
Yes.
Tax Pro family. If we don't see you from here to the end of the year, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Be safe during this holiday season. And remember, it's a season to be happy and cheerful and be grateful. Every day, my mom and dad taught me something. Every day you wake up is a blessing from God. So every time I wake up, I always say, thank you, Jesus, for this day. So thank you for this day. Thank you